My wife thought I was clueless until police dragged their stuck bodies from my house, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from when I still believed in things like trust and 15-year marriages meaning something. My name is John Matthews. I'm 43 years old, work in corporate finance for a mid-sized firm in suburban Connecticut, and until recently, I thought I had life figured out. Not spectacular, mind you, just figured out. Claire and I had built what I considered a solid partnership over 15 years. No kids, but that was a mutual decision we'd made early on. We had our routines, coffee together before work, quiet dinners at 7:30, weekend drives to the farmer's market. The intimacy had tapered off. What marriage doesn't experience that? But I attributed it to age, work stress, the natural progression of long-term relationships. Claire worked as an office manager for a dental practice, nothing glamorous but steady. At 39, she still turned heads when we went out, something I'd grown comfortable with over the years. The attention of other men had always seemed to amuse her without tempting her. Or so I believed. That Saturday in March started like any other. We'd driven to the park for our usual weekend walk, the spring air still carrying winter's bite. Claire had worn her oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky, a habit I'd always found endearing. "Honey, can you grab my regular glasses from the car?" she asked me, squinting at her phone. "These are too dark to read in this light." I jogged back to her Lexus, whistling some forgotten tune. Her purse sat on the passenger seat, but I knew she kept a spare pair in the glove compartment. As I reached for it, my hand knocked something under the passenger seat. Curious, I bent down and felt around until my fingers closed on a small bottle, personal lubricant, KY Intense, the kind specifically designed for enhancement. I stood there in the parking lot, holding this bottle like it was a live grenade. My mind ran through a catalog of explanations, each more pathetic than the last. Maybe she bought it for us? But we hadn't been intimate in 3 months. Maybe it was old? The receipt tucked under the bottle was dated 2 weeks ago. The bottle had been deliberately hidden, pushed far under the seat behind the floor mat rail. This wasn't something that had rolled out of a shopping bag. This was concealment. Did you find them? Claire's voice carried across the parking lot. I shoved the bottle back where I'd found it, grabbed her glasses from the glove compartment, and walked back with what I hoped was a normal expression. My face felt like a mask that might crack if I smiled too wide. "Here you go," I said, handing her the glasses. She swapped them out, looked at me, and her brow furrowed slightly. "You okay?" "You look pale," she observed. "Just winded from the jog," I lied. "Not as young as I used to be." She laughed, a light tinkling sound that I'd loved for 15 years. Now it sounded different. Practiced. Performance. We finished our walk, Claire chatting about her week, office gossip, plans for spring cleaning. I nodded and responded appropriately while my mind dissected every word, searching for tells, lies, slips. When had I become suspicious of my own wife? About 10 minutes ago, apparently. That night, I lay in bed next to her sleeping form, studying the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. Her breathing was deep and even, the sleep of someone without guilt. Or someone who'd grown comfortable with deception. The lubricant wasn't for us. I knew that with absolute certainty, which meant it was for someone else. Someone she was seeing. Someone she was f***ing while I sat in my office calculating quarterly projections. I could confront her. Wake her up right now, demand answers, have the fight that would end with either reconciliation or lawyers. That's what most men would do. That's what emotional men would do. But I'd built my career on being methodical, strategic, thorough. You don't make accusations in boardrooms without documentation. You don't enter negotiations without leverage. I wasn't going to be the fool who confronted his cheating wife with nothing but suspicion. I was going to be the man who destroyed her with evidence. I became someone else in the days that followed. A man living 2 lives, separated by a membrane so thin I sometimes forgot which was real. By day, I was John Matthews, devoted husband, bringing Claire coffee in bed, asking about her day, maintaining our routines with suffocating normalcy. By night, I was something else entirely, calculating, methodical, preparing for war with the patience of a sniper. Monday morning, Claire left for work with her usual kiss on my cheek. The moment her car turned the corner, I was in motion. The lubricant bottle. I needed to see it again, study it, understand it. I found it exactly where I'd left it, wedged behind the floor mat rail like a dirty secret. This time I photographed it from every angle, documenting its position, the receipt, the brand, KY Intense. I'd looked it up. Designed for heightened sensation and passionate encounters. Not the kind of thing a woman buys for a husband she barely touches. That's when the idea struck me. I drove to 3 different stores to avoid suspicion, purchasing supplies with cash, superglue, the industrial kind used for automotive repairs, a small syringe from a hobby shop, latex gloves from a pharmacy. I felt like a criminal preparing for a heist, except I was planning something far more personal. Back home, I worked with surgical precision. The KY bottle's cap unscrewed easily. These things weren't designed for security. Using the syringe, I extracted most of the lubricant and replaced it with the superglue, carefully maintaining the same weight and consistency. The real art was in resealing the cap. I applied a thin layer of adhesive to the threads, just enough to create a bond that would require significant force to break. When it did open, it would seem like normal resistance, maybe a sticky cap. They'd never suspect the contents had been replaced until it was far too late. I returned the bottle to its hiding spot, ensuring everything looked undisturbed. Claire would never know I'd found her secret. Not yet. Phase 2 began that evening. "Honey," I said to her over dinner, cutting into my steak with practiced calm, "I've been thinking about home security." Claire looked up from her salad. "Home security?" she asked. "There have been break-ins in the Riverside neighborhood. 3 in the last month," I explained. This was true. I'd researched it carefully. "I want to install cameras. Nothing invasive, just enough to keep us safe." She shrugged. "If it makes you feel better," she replied. "You know I don't pay attention to that tech stuff." Perfect. Her disinterest in technology would be her downfall. I spent the next 3 days installing a state-of-the-art system. Hidden cameras in smoke detectors, motion sensors that looked like air fresheners, even one disguised as a phone charger in our bedroom. All of it connected to a cloud server accessible from my phone. I made a show of installing obvious cameras at the front and back doors, decoys for Claire to see and feel safe about. "You're so thorough," she commented, watching me adjust the front door camera. "I love how you take care of us." Us. The word tasted like ash. My preparations extended beyond surveillance. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, transferred small amounts that wouldn't be noticed, photographed every document in our filing cabinet, tax returns, investment statements, the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 15 years ago when we were young and in love and stupid enough to think we'd never need it. The prenup had been her father's idea, actually. He'd insisted, wanting to protect his daughter's future inheritance. The irony was delicious. It protected my assets in case of adultery. Claire had laughed when signing it. "Like either of us would ever cheat," she'd said at the time. I consulted 3 divorce attorneys, paying cash for consultations using a fake name. "Just research," I told them. "Hypothetical scenarios." They all said the same thing. With video evidence of adultery and a solid prenup, she'd get nothing. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy while my world tilted off its axis. Claire would curl against me on the couch, and I'd force myself not to recoil. She'd tell me about her day, and I'd analyze every word for deception. When she said she was having lunch with her friend Sarah, I'd check Sarah's Instagram later. No photos of lunch, no mentions of Claire. The lies accumulated like evidence in a court case. Working late became her favorite excuse, though the dental office closed at 5. Shopping trips that produced no bags. A new password on her phone, she claimed, was for security at work. Thursday night, she was particularly affectionate, running her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I love you too," I replied automatically. The words hollow. "I was thinking," she continued, "you work so hard. You should take a trip. That conference in Chicago you mentioned last month. You should go." I hadn't mentioned any conference, but I played along. "Maybe you're right," I agreed. "You could go next week." "Take a whole week, relax, network." "I'll be fine here," she suggested enthusiastically. There it was. She was trying to clear me out. Create space for whatever she had planned. Actually, I said, the plan crystallizing instantly, that's a great idea. I'll book it tomorrow. She smiled, genuinely pleased. I saw it then, the excitement she couldn't quite hide, the anticipation of freedom. That night I created an elaborate fiction. Flights, hotel reservations, conference schedules. I printed everything, left it casually on my dresser for her to see. I even packed a suitcase, complete with conference-appropriate attire. Sunday came too quickly and not fast enough. Claire drove me to the airport, kissing me goodbye with enthusiasm that felt like a performance. "Have a great week," she said brightly. "Don't work too hard." "I'll miss you," I told her, meaning it in a way she'd never understand. I would miss the woman I thought I'd married, the life I thought we'd built. I watched her drive away, then caught a cab to the Hampton Inn 15 minutes from our house. Room 237, paid for in cash under another name. I set up my laptop, connected to our home security system, and settled in to watch my marriage implode. As I watched her wave goodbye from our front door through the security camera, I realized I wasn't leaving for a business trip. I was leaving to watch my wife destroy herself. Monday passed without incident. Claire went to work, came home, made herself dinner, watched Netflix. She seemed restless, checking her phone constantly, but nothing happened. I sat in my hotel room eating takeout and wondering if I'd misread everything. Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. The motion alert hit my phone at 2:47 p.m. Claire's car in the driveway, 3 hours before the dental office closed. My heart hammered as I opened the security app, switching to the front door camera. She wasn't alone, a black BMW pulled in behind her. Late model, tinted windows, the kind of car that screamed compensation. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man who made my stomach clench with recognition and rage. Not recognition because I knew him, I'd never seen him before, but recognition of a type. Tall, maybe 6'2", dark hair styled with product. The kind of build that came from gym selfies and protein shakes. 35 at most, wearing a tight polo that showed off arms Claire would find irresistible. He walked to our front door, my front door, with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. I switched to the living room camera as they entered. The familiarity between them was immediate, practiced. He didn't look around with curiosity like a first-time visitor. He knew where to hang his jacket, which way the kitchen was. This wasn't new. "God, I missed you," he said, pulling her against him. "Derek," she breathed against his mouth. "It's been too long." Derek, now he had a name. I screenshot everything, recorded everything. My hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. They kissed like teenagers, hungry and graceless. His hands were all over her, and she was laughing. That genuine, throaty laugh I hadn't heard in years. When was the last time she'd laughed like that with me? "Want some wine?" she offered. "Later," he replied, already pulling her toward the hallway. "I've been thinking about you all week." They moved past the camera's range, but I knew where they were going. Not our bedroom. Even Claire had that much decency, apparently. The guest room camera activated, and I forced myself to watch. Evidence. I needed evidence. They were on each other immediately, clothes disappearing with practiced efficiency. No awkwardness, no hesitation. They'd choreographed this dance many times before. How many times had she done this while I was at work? How many times in our house, in our bed? I watched Derek reach for Claire's purse. She must have told him where she kept it. He pulled out the bottle of lubricant and my pulse quickened. This was it. "Jesus, this cap is stuck," he muttered, twisting hard. "Just pull it," she said impatiently. Already naked and waiting, he yanked harder. I could see his forearms straining, the kind of effort that would definitely break my seal. There was an audible pop as it gave way. What happened next was both horrible and perfectly justified. They'd applied it liberally. Too caught up in passion to notice the unusual consistency, the slightly different smell. Superglue doesn't work instantly. It needs a moment, pressure, skin contact. They gave it all three. The screaming started about 90 seconds later. "What the hell?" Derek shouted, his voice high with panic. Oh God, something's wrong!" Claire was crying out, her voice shrill with pain and terror. I watched them realize what was happening, the horror dawning as they tried to separate and couldn't. Derek attempted to pull away, causing Claire to scream louder. They were stuck in the most intimate, humiliating way possible. "What is this?" Derek was examining the bottle, his face contorting. This is glue! This is friggin' glue!" he yelled. "That's impossible!" Claire sobbed. "I bought it myself, She stopped mid-sentence, and I saw the moment of realization cross her face. Not full understanding, but the first crack of suspicion. They tried everything. Derek, in his panic, attempted brute force, causing both of them to howl in agony. Claire begged him to stop, then suggested water. They managed an awkward shuffle to the guest bathroom, but water did nothing to industrial adhesive. Their skin was bonded at the molecular level. "We need help," Claire whimpered. "We need an ambulance. Are you insane?" Derek's voice was pure panic. "We can't." "How would we explain?" he asked desperately. "I don't care!" she screamed back. "I don't care anymore. This hurts so much. Please, just call." I watched Derek fumble for his phone, trying to maintain some dignity while literally attached to my wife. The conversation with 911 was almost comedic in its horror. "We need an ambulance," he said urgently. Then he paused, struggling with the words. "No, we're not injured exactly. We're stuck together." "No, not trapped. Stuck? With adhesive. Please, just send someone." Claire was crying uncontrollably now, the kind of deep, humiliated sobs that came from realizing your life was about to change forever. She was right about that. The dispatcher must have thought it was a prank at first, but Derek's desperate insistence finally convinced them. I heard him give our address, my address, and say the words that would doom them both. "Please hurry, and maybe be discreet," he pleaded. There would be no discretion. Not for this. I checked out of the hotel methodically, taking my time. No need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. The 15-minute drive home felt like a victory lap. Every red light was a moment to savor what was coming. As I turned onto our street, I could see the ambulance in our driveway, lights flashing like a beacon calling every neighbor to witness. Mrs. Bennett from next door was already on her lawn, phone in hand. The teenage Parker boys were recording from their bikes. I parked slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw me arrive, making sure they knew I was coming home to this. As I drove toward the house I'd shared with Claire for 15 years, I realized I wasn't going home to comfort my wife. I was going home to watch her world end. The scene inside my house was organized chaos. 2 paramedics knelt beside the guest bed, their professional composure cracking at the edges. A police officer stood near the door, notepad in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The smell hit me first, adhesive remover, sharp and chemical, mixing with the musty scent of fear sweat. "Sir, you can't," the officer started to say. "I'm John Matthews," I interrupted calmly, producing my driver's license. "This is my house." "That's my wife." The officer's face went through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and finally, deep discomfort. "Mr. Matthews, there's been an incident," he said awkwardly. "So I see," I replied, stepping past him. The guest bedroom door was open. What I saw there was better than anything I'd imagined. Claire and Derek were covered, barely by medical sheets, but their predicament was obvious. The paramedics had managed to separate some of their skin using chemical solvents, but the most intimate areas remained bonded. Claire's face was red and swollen from crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivers. Derek wouldn't look at anyone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Sir, you can't—" One of the paramedics began to protest. "Insurance documentation," I said smoothly. "I'll need evidence for the claim." Claire's eyes found mine through her tears, and I watched her face transform. Horror, understanding, and finally, naked fear. "John," she whispered. "Oh God, John, I can explain." "No need," I cut her off, keeping the camera steady. "The situation rather explains itself." Derek finally looked up and our eyes met. This was the man who'd been in my house, in my bed, inside my wife. This younger, stronger, more handsome man who thought he could take what was mine without consequence. "Listen, man," he started, his voice strained. "We didn't know. Someone switched the rage I'd kept carefully contained for a week erupted. I crossed the room in 2 strides and drove my fist into his jaw with 15 years of suppressed fury. His head snapped back, blood exploding from his nose across the medical sheet, across my wife's skin. "That's for using my house," I said quietly, shaking out my hand. "And my wife." The room exploded into motion. The paramedics rushed to separate us while the officer stepped between Derek and me. Claire was screaming, not from pain this time, but from the realization that her world was collapsing. "Do you want to press charges?" The officer asked Derek, who was holding his bleeding nose. "Against him?" Derek spat blood. "He attacked me!" he protested angrily. "You're trespassing in his house," the officer pointed out. "With his wife." "I'd say you got off easy." I turned to the officer. "Am I free to document this for insurance purposes?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's your house," he confirmed. I continued filming, capturing everything. The medical equipment, the chemical bottles, the blood on the sheets, Claire trying to cover herself while still attached to her lover. Derek's face, now swelling beautifully. "We need to transport them," one paramedic announced. "They'll need surgical separation at the hospital." "Together?" I asked innocently. "In the same ambulance?" "We don't have a choice," the paramedic replied, clearly wishing he'd called in sick today. As they prepared Claire and Derek for transport, a process that involved a specially modified gurney and a lot of awkward positioning, I followed them out. The crowd outside had grown. Half the neighborhood was there, phones out, recording everything. Mrs. Bennett looked scandalized and delighted. The Parker boys were live streaming. Claire saw them all, and fresh tears streamed down her face. "Please," she begged the paramedics, "can't you cover us more?" But there was no covering this. No hiding what she'd done, what she'd become. As they loaded her into the ambulance, still grotesquely attached to Derek like some medieval punishment for adultery, our eyes met one last time. "How?" she mouthed silently. I just smiled and kept filming. The ambulance doors closed, but the show wasn't over. I turned to address the crowd, my neighbors, the people we'd barbecued with, whose kids we'd watched, whose lives had intersected with ours for years. "I apologize for the disturbance," I announced formally. "I've been in Chicago all week for business. Came home early to surprise my wife." I paused, letting the irony sink in. "Surprise!" someone actually applauded. Others laughed nervously. Mrs. Bennett approached me, her face a mask of sympathy. "John, dear, if you need anything," she offered kindly. "Actually," I said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "if anyone has video of what happened here today, I'd appreciate copies. For the divorce proceedings." At least 6 people immediately offered to send me footage. I went back inside my house, not ours anymore, and poured myself a scotch. The good stuff, the 20-year Macallan I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this didn't qualify, nothing would. My phone was already buzzing. Text messages, Facebook notifications, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The story was spreading like wildfire through our social circles. By tomorrow, everyone would know. I made 2 calls. First, Dylan Caldwell, the best divorce attorney I'd found during my research. "Dylan, it's John Matthews. Remember that hypothetical situation we discussed?" "It's not hypothetical anymore," I said. "How bad?" he asked immediately. She was literally glued to him. "The paramedics just took them away, still attached," I explained. There was silence then. "I'll clear my schedule." "Can you come in tomorrow?" he asked. 9 a.m., I suggested. "Bring everything. Videos, photos, financial documents, everything," he instructed. The second call was to my office. "Jim, it's John. I need to extend my time off," I said. "Family emergency," I added. He expressed concern, and I continued. "Yes, Claire and I are separating." After his sympathetic response, I said, "I appreciate that. Another week should do it. Thanks for understanding." I sat in my living room, in the house I'd worked 15 years to pay for, and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The waiting was over. The pretending was done. Tomorrow I'd begin the process of taking apart Claire's life piece by piece, legally and thoroughly. As I watched my wife disappear into that ambulance, still attached to her lover like some twisted warning to other cheaters, I realized my real work was just beginning. Dylan Caldwell's office occupied the top floor of a glass building overlooking downtown Hartford. Expensive art, leather furniture, the kind of place that whispered, "You can't afford me," to most visitors. But I could afford him, and more importantly, I could afford to destroy Claire properly. Dylan watched the footage on my phone with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle. "In 30 years of practice," he said, setting down the phone, "I've never seen anything like this. This is beautiful." "I have 8 different angles from neighbors," I added, sliding a thumb drive across his desk. "Plus all the security footage from my house showing their affair." He opened the prenuptial agreement, scanning the adultery clause Claire's father had insisted upon. The irony remained delicious. "She gets nothing," Dylan confirmed. "The house is in your name, purchased before marriage. The investment accounts are protected. The retirement funds are yours. With this evidence, she won't even get alimony." "What can she fight for?" I asked. "Realistically, her personal belongings and her car, which I see is in her name. Maybe some cash for moving expenses if she has a sympathetic judge," he explained. "But John—" He leaned forward. "No judge will be sympathetic after seeing this footage. We filed that afternoon. Dylan had the papers drawn up in record time, citing adultery with photographic and video evidence attached. He also filed an emergency motion for exclusive use of the marital home, arguing that Claire had defiled it with her affair." "Defiled?" I questioned. "Legal term," Dylan grinned. "Judges eat that biblical stuff up." While the legal machinery churned into motion, the social destruction was happening organically. Someone, probably one of the Parker boys, had posted the video online with the title, "Cheating Wife Literally Glued to Lover." It went viral within hours. Not globally viral, but Connecticut viral, which was enough. Claire's Facebook page disappeared by evening. Derek's Instagram went private, then vanished entirely. I learned from the hospital grapevine, amazing how many people suddenly wanted to talk to me, that the surgical separation had taken 3 hours. They'd needed a plastic surgeon to minimize scarring, though some would be permanent. Both were kept overnight for observation and to manage the risk of infection. Derek disappeared immediately after discharge. His BMW never returned to our street. His apartment, I'd found the address through some creative searching, showed a moving truck 2 days later. Claire tried calling him dozens of times according to the phone records Dylan subpoenaed, but they all went unanswered. He'd vanished like smoke, leaving Claire to face the consequences alone. She showed up at the house on Thursday, escorted by a police officer per the emergency order. She was allowed 2 hours to pack personal belongings under supervision. I stayed in my office, door locked, listening to her sob as she filled suitcases. "Can I talk to him?" I heard her ask the officer. "Just for 5 minutes?" "Ma'am, that would violate the order," the officer responded. "You'll have your chance in court." When she left, I found she'd taken only clothes and toiletries. Our wedding photos remained on the walls. Her jewelry, gifts I'd given her over the years, sat untouched in the bedroom. Either she felt too guilty to take them, or knew they'd be worthless in the face of what she'd lost. The divorce proceedings moved with unusual speed. Claire's attorney, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Morse, tried her best with an impossible case. "My client claims she was set up," Patricia argued at the first hearing. "Someone tampered with her personal items." "Your client," Dylan responded smoothly, "was engaged in adultery in the marital home. Whether she chose the wrong lubricant is irrelevant to the fact of her infidelity, which is documented extensively. The judge, a stern woman named Harriet Powell, reviewed the evidence with barely concealed disgust. "Mrs. Matthews," she addressed Claire directly, "do you deny having an affair?" Claire, wearing a conservative dress that couldn't hide the faint scars on her neck, whispered, "No, Your Honor." "Do you deny bringing your lover into the marital home?" The judge continued. "No, Your Honor," she whispered again. "Then the court sees no relevance in your claim of tampering," Judge Powell declared. "The prenuptial agreement is clear and valid. Adultery voids any claim to marital assets. The final decree was brutal in its simplicity. Claire received her car, her personal belongings, and a cash payment of $5,000. My idea, actually. enough for a security deposit and first month's rent somewhere. I wasn't a monster. I just wanted justice. Dylan handled everything brilliantly. Claire's attempts to claim emotional abuse fell flat. Her lawyer's suggestion that I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing was dismissed as desperate speculation without evidence. Even if Mr. Matthews had somehow switched the contents, Judge Powell noted, it wouldn't change the fundamental fact of adultery. This court will not reward infidelity because the cheating party chose an unfortunate lubricant. Someone in the gallery actually snickered. The last time I saw Claire was at the final settlement meeting. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and hollow. The confident woman who'd laughed with her lover in my living room was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken. Why? She asked when the lawyer stepped out to file the final papers. If you knew, why didn't you just divorce me? I considered lying, giving her some comfort. But she deserved the truth. Because you made me a fool, I said simply. In my own house, in my own bed. You didn't just cheat, Claire. You humiliated me. So I returned the favor. I loved you, she whispered. No, I replied firmly. You loved the life I provided. There's a difference. She signed the papers without another word. Later, I learned through the suburban gossip network that she'd moved 2 towns away, found a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic. The story had followed her. Small towns have long memories for spectacular scandals. Someone told me they'd seen her at a grocery store, head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Derek Paulson vanished completely. Some said he'd moved to California. Others claimed he was in Florida. One persistent rumor suggested he'd changed his name. I didn't care enough to investigate. As Claire walked out of that conference room with nothing but the clothes on her back, I realized that revenge wasn't just a dish best served cold. It was a feast best served with witnesses. 6 months later, my life has found its rhythm. The house feels different now. Not empty, just honest. I've redecorated the guest room, turned it into a home office. The security cameras remain active, though they mostly capture delivery drivers and the occasional raccoon. Old habits. The story has become suburban legend. I'm the guy whose wife got glued to her lover, spoken with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. Women at the gym suddenly find excuses to chat. My neighbor, Mrs. Bennett, regularly brings over casseroles and mentions her divorced daughter, who's about your age and very accomplished. I delete the dating app matches without reading them. 3 women from neighboring towns have reached out on Facebook, all mentioning they'd heard about my situation and admiring how I handled things. My story, it seems, has become a litmus test for a certain type of woman, ones who appreciate calculated justice over emotional explosion. I'm not ready for that. May never be. Claire lives 30 miles away now, in a studio apartment above a pizza shop. I know this not because I've stalked her, but because mutual acquaintances can't help but update me. She works at a medical clinic, drives a 10-year-old Honda, keeps to herself. Someone mentioned seeing her at a coffee shop, reading alone, looking resigned. That's the word they used. Resigned. The financial settlement left me comfortable. The house is worth more without the weight of a failed marriage. My investment portfolio, no longer supporting 2 people, has grown substantially. I've taken up golf, joined a book club, started learning Italian, cliché middle-aged divorce activities. But they fill the time. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I went too far, if simple divorce would have been enough. Then I remember the sound of her laughing with Derek in our living room, the practiced ease with which they'd moved together, the months or years of deception I'll never fully uncover. No, I didn't go too far. I went exactly far enough. My phone buzzes with a text from Dylan Caldwell. He's handling another divorce and wants to know if I'd speak with his client, a man whose wife has been cheating with his business partner. He needs to know there's justice possible, Dylan writes. I agree to meet him, not to share my methods, those were specific to my situation, but to share the philosophy, document everything. Plan carefully, strike decisively. Make the cost of betrayal so high that it becomes a cautionary tale. The man I meet is younger than me, maybe 35, with the shell-shocked look of recent discovery. Over coffee, I tell him an abbreviated version of my story. His eyes widen at the glue, narrow with appreciation at the planning. Did it make you feel better? he asks me. The revenge? No, I answer honestly. But it made me feel even. And sometimes that's enough. He nods, understanding. I sleep well these days. 8 hours straight, no nightmares, no regrets. My conscience is clear. I didn't create Claire's betrayal. I only ensured it had consequences. Spectacular, humiliating, publicly documented consequences that will follow her forever. Justice, I've learned, isn't always swift. But when it's properly planned, when every contingency is considered and every detail executed perfectly, it can be absolutely devastating. The cost of betrayal, it turns out, is everything. Claire paid it in full. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I used to believe that love meant never asking questions. That was my first mistake. The alarm screamed at 5 a.m., same as it had for the past 15 years. I rolled out of bed without hitting snooze, muscle memory guiding me through the darkness to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at the man in the mirror. 42 years old, graying at the temples, shoulders that ached from loading trucks all day. Still strong, still willing to work double shifts when Angela mentioned something else we needed. Angela was still sleeping, her dark hair spread across the pillow like silk. Even after all these years, she was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made other men look twice in grocery stores, made waitresses give me that pitying smile that said, "How did you manage that?" I'd kiss her forehead before leaving for work, careful not to wake her. She needed her sleep. Taking care of the house was exhausting, she always said. The warehouse was 20 minutes away, and I knew every pothole on that route. I'd been driving it since Angela and I got married, back when I thought providing meant everything, when I believed that if I just worked hard enough, loved quietly enough, sacrificed completely enough, I could build us the kind of life she deserved. My immigrant father had taught me that men showed love through work, through never complaining, through putting your family's needs before your own comfort. So I worked. Double shifts when they offered them, overtime whenever possible. When Angela mentioned wanting new furniture, I picked up weekend work. When she needed a better car, I sold my motorcycle. When she wanted to redecorate the living room for the third time in 5 years, I smiled and handed over my credit card. That's what love looked like, I thought. That's what devotion meant. But lately, something had been changing. Small things at first. The way Angela would dress up for her visits to her sister Maria, putting on makeup and perfume like she was going somewhere special instead of just hanging out with family. The way she'd come home with shopping bags despite our conversations about saving money. The way she'd grown distant and irritable in the days leading up to each trip to Maria's place, like she was somewhere else in her mind. "I need to visit Maria this weekend," she'd announced 3 nights ago, not looking up from her phone. "She's having problems with the kids again." I'd nodded, same as always. Of course. Take whatever you need. But this time, the familiar knot in my stomach felt different, tighter, more insistent. I found myself watching her pack, noting how carefully she folded the new lingerie I'd never seen before, how she packed 3 times as many clothes as she'd need for a weekend visit. When she kissed me goodbye Friday morning, her lips felt rehearsed, like she was performing for an audience. "I'll be back Sunday evening," she said, already turning away. I watched her drive away in the Honda I'd bought her last year, watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner, and for the first time in 15 years of marriage, I decided to trust my gut instead of my heart. That's when I made the decision. Tomorrow, Saturday, I would drive to Maria's house. The 2-hour drive to Maria's house on Saturday morning Felt like driving toward my own execution. Every mile marker brought me closer to either relief or devastation, and I couldn't decide which outcome I was hoping for. Maybe Angela really was at her sister's place. Maybe I was just being paranoid, letting work stress and middle-age insecurity poison my marriage. But deep down, I knew better. I'd always liked Maria. Where Angela was beautiful and high maintenance, Maria was practical and hard-working. She raised 3 kids alone after her husband left, worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and clothed, never complained about her circumstances. When we did visit, which was rare, now that I thought about it, Maria would always ask about my work, thank me for taking care of Angela, treat me like family. She had the same dark eyes as her sister, but hers held warmth instead of calculation. That was the word that had been nagging at me for months. Calculation. The way Angela timed her requests for money just after I'd gotten paid. The way she'd grown affectionate right before mentioning something expensive she wanted. The way she'd disappear for entire weekends, claiming family obligation, then return refreshed and distant, like she'd been somewhere that recharged her batteries. I rehearsed the conversation in my head as highway mile markers ticked by. Hey, Maria. I wanted to surprise Angela. Thought I'd drive up and take you both out to dinner. Simple, reasonable, loving. If Angela was really there, we'd have a nice evening together. If she wasn't, the knot in my stomach tightened. I thought about the last time we'd been intimate, really intimate, not just the mechanical coupling that had become our routine. It had been months. Angela always had excuses, tired, stressed, worried about money. But now I wondered if there was another reason, if someone else was satisfying needs I thought were mine alone to meet. Maria's house sat at the end of a quiet street in a working-class neighborhood, small but well-maintained. Her old Nissan was in the driveway, but I didn't see Angela's Honda anywhere. Maybe she'd parked it elsewhere. Maybe she'd run to the store. Maybe. I knocked on the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maria opened it with a smile that immediately crumbled into confusion. Carlos? What are you doing here? I wanted to surprise Angela, I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. Thought I'd drive up and take you both out to dinner. The confusion on Maria's face deepened, then shifted into something that looked like pity. Carlos, Angela's not here. Did she run to the store? I can wait. Maria's eyes filled with tears. No, Carlos. She hasn't been here in months. I thought you knew she stopped visiting. The world tilted. Not shock, exactly. Some part of me had been expecting this. But the confirmation hit like a physical blow, cold and clarifying and absolute. My wife of 15 years had been lying to me, systematically, elaborately, for months. I'm so sorry, Maria whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. I should have called you. I should have said something when she stopped coming. But I thought maybe you two were having problems. Maybe she needed space. What did she tell you? My voice sounded calm, controlled. I was surprised by how steady it was. Maria looked away. She used to complain sometimes about feeling stuck, about wanting more excitement in her life, about... She stopped, unwilling to wound me further. About me, I asked. Carlos, you're a good man. You work hard. You provide for her. You never raise your voice or cause trouble. Any woman would be lucky. Thank you, I interrupted gently. Thank you for telling me the truth. I walked back to my car on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Maria called after me, offering coffee, offering to talk, but I just waved and got behind the wheel. I sat there for a moment, engine running, staring at the house where my wife wasn't and never had been on those weekends. Then I put the car in drive and began the journey home. Not the same man who had left that morning. This was someone who had been betrayed, someone who now understood the difference between love and stupidity. Someone who was done being grateful for scraps of affection from a woman who saw his devotion as weakness to exploit. The drive home felt shorter somehow. Maybe because I finally knew where I was going. The house felt different when I walked in Saturday afternoon. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same faint scent of Angela's perfume lingering in the air. But now, I saw it all clearly. The expensive throw pillows I'd bought without question, the artwork she'd insisted we needed, the credit card bills I'd paid without examining too closely. Evidence of my own willful blindness. I sat in my recliner, the one piece of furniture that was truly mine, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. For the first time since our wedding day, I wasn't reacting to Angela's needs or wants or moods. I was thinking for myself. Sunday morning, I called in sick to work. First time in over 3 years. My supervisor sounded genuinely concerned. Carlos Mendoza didn't miss shifts, didn't call in, didn't put his own needs above the job. But this was bigger than work. This was about rebuilding my life on a foundation of truth instead of delusion. By noon, I was sitting across from Sarah, divorce attorney. I'd found her online, read reviews from other working-class men who'd been taken advantage of by wives who saw marriage as a meal ticket. Sarah was sharp, professional, and brutally honest about my situation. "You're in a better position than most men who come to me," she said, reviewing the paperwork I'd brought. "House is in your name alone, purchased before marriage. She has no employment history to claim spousal support. Ohio's no-fault divorce laws actually protect you here since you've been the sole provider." The legal strategy was surprisingly simple. Ohio recognized the difference between marital and separate property. Since Angela had never contributed financially and the house predated our marriage, she had no claim to it. Her lack of employment history meant no alimony. I'd probably have to give her half of the money in our joint checking account, about $3,000, and maybe split some of the newer furniture, but that was all. "What about her lies?" I asked. "The affair?" "Ohio is no fault," Sarah explained. "Adultery doesn't affect property division, but it does give us leverage if she tries to drag this out or make unreasonable demands." I signed the retainer agreement and authorized her to prepare divorce papers for service. The act felt decisive, final, like crossing a bridge I'd been afraid to approach for years. As I wrote the check, I realized this was the first major financial decision I'd made in our marriage without considering Angela's opinion first. Driving home, I called my mother for the first time in months. Angela had always found reasons to avoid family gatherings. My relatives were too loud, too traditional, too judgmental of her lifestyle. Gradually, I'd stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped maintaining relationships that had sustained me before marriage. "Mijo," my mother said when I told her about the divorce, "I've been waiting years for you to wake up." That evening, I cleaned the house thoroughly, cooked myself a proper meal, and waited. Not with anxiety or dread, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had finally stopped being a victim. Angela would return Sunday evening with her lies and her stories and her performance, but this time I'd be ready. I was done being grateful for crumbs, done accepting blame for her unhappiness, done pretending that love meant never asking questions. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the man who'd driven to Maria's house yesterday, desperate for answers. I was someone who already had them, someone who'd decided what came next. Angela returned Sunday evening with shopping bags and stories, her performance so polished it was almost insulting. She breezed through the door talking about lunch with Maria, a spa day they'd supposedly shared, even showed me a small bottle of cologne she claimed to have bought me at a shop near Maria's house. "You should have seen Maria's face when I told her about your promotion possibility," she said, hanging up her coat. "She's so proud of how hard you work." I let her perform, taking mental notes of each fabrication. The ease with which she lied was almost fascinating. Clinical, rehearsed, delivered with just enough detail to seem authentic, but not enough to be verified. She'd clearly had months to perfect this routine. "How was your weekend?" she asked, settling onto the couch with the casual comfort of someone who believed her deception was complete. "Quiet. Caught up on some projects around the house." She nodded absently, already scrolling through her phone. This was our new normal. Brief, surface conversations while she lived her real life elsewhere. I wondered how long she'd been planning to leave me, or if she even planned to leave at all. Maybe I was just the safety net, the reliable provider who kept her comfortable while she found excitement elsewhere. "I was thinking," she said, not looking up from her screen, "Maria might need me to visit more often. She's really struggling with the kids, and I think I'm the only family she has who can help." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only was she lying about where she'd been, she was already setting up her next deception. How many more weekends of lies had she planned? How long did she think she could maintain this double life? "That's generous of you," I said calmly. She smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen since she'd walked in. "You're so understanding, Carlos. Most husbands would be jealous of all the time I spend helping family." I made dinner while she unpacked, asked gentle questions about her weekend, even complimented the new clothes she was wearing. Clothes I now realized had been bought for someone else's enjoyment. Angela relaxed into her familiar role, complaining about Maria's financial problems, making subtle digs about how I worked too much, building toward her real agenda. "I was thinking of visiting again next weekend," she said over dinner. "Maria asked if I could help her with some job applications, and I hate to see her struggle." "Of course," I replied. "Whatever she needs." After dinner, Angela settled in to watch television, comfortable and secure in her deception. She'd successfully manipulated me for months, convinced me to fund her double life while making me feel grateful for the privilege. The woman I'd worked double shifts to support, the woman I'd sacrificed my own comfort and friendships to please, had been laughing at my devotion while living her real life with another man. I waited until she was completely relaxed, until she'd stopped performing and become simply herself. Selfish, entitled, comfortable in her control over me. Then I walked to the kitchen, retrieved the envelope Sarah Chen had prepared, and returned to the living room. "Angela," I said quietly. She looked up from her phone with mild irritation, annoyed to be interrupted. I handed her the envelope. "I talked to your sister yesterday. You haven't been there in 2 months. This marriage is over. Get out of my house." The change in her face was instant, confusion shifting to shock, then to something like panic as she tore open the envelope and saw the divorce papers. She read quickly, her face going pale, then looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Carlos, what is this? What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I pressed. She tried tears first. "Baby, I don't understand. Did Maria say something? She must have been confused, maybe—" "Angela, stop," I said. The firmness in my voice seemed to surprise her. She'd never heard me speak with absolute authority before, never seen me refuse to be moved by her emotions. "You've been lying to me for months. You've been somewhere else with someone else, spending money I work 16-hour days to earn. I know about the affair. I know about all of it." She switched tactics, tears becoming anger. "You had me followed? You've been spying on me? I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to my face every weekend for months. I never— Stop lying to me." The words came out louder than I'd intended, but they felt good, liberating. I'm done listening to lies. I'm done pretending this marriage is something it isn't. I'm done being grateful for scraps of attention from someone who sees my love as weakness. Angela's performance crumbled. The tears, the confusion, the outrage, all of it fell away, leaving something harder and colder underneath. "Fine," she said. "You want to know the truth? Yes, I've been seeing someone who makes me feel alive, who doesn't bore me to death talking about overtime pay and home repairs. Someone who understands that I need more than this suffocating small life you've built for us. The words should have hurt. She'd designed them to wound, to make me feel inadequate, to regain control through emotional devastation. But instead, I felt only relief. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you for finally telling me the truth. Now I know this decision is right." Her face changed again. She'd expected pain, rage, jealousy, emotions she could manipulate. My calm acceptance terrified her because it meant she'd lost all leverage. "Carlos, wait. Let's talk about this. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. I'll stop seeing him. "No," I replied. "You can't just throw away 15 years of marriage." "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that," I replied. She tried everything then. Promises, threats, bargaining, emotional blackmail. She threatened to take half of everything, claimed she'd been unhappy for years, accused me of driving her to cheat through neglect and emotional unavailability. Every weapon in her arsenal, deployed with desperate precision. But I'd prepared for this. Sarah Chen had given me armor against Angela's emotional warfare, and more importantly, I'd finally seen through the illusion that had controlled me for years. This woman had never loved me. She'd loved what I provided, the security I represented, the comfortable life my labor had built. But me, Carlos, the man who got up at 5 a.m. and worked until his back ached, who'd sacrificed his own dreams to fund hers, I'd been invisible to her. "I want you out of the house tonight," I said when her tirade finally ended. "Pack whatever you need. We can arrange a time for you to get the rest of your things." "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied. She stared at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. The man she'd married, eager to please, grateful for attention, willing to sacrifice everything for her approval, was gone. In his place stood someone who understood his own worth, someone who refused to be anyone's safety net or consolation prize. Angela packed 2 suitcases in angry silence, slamming drawers and muttering under her breath about ungrateful men and wasted years. When she was done, she stood in the doorway looking back at the house she'd never really appreciated, the life she'd taken for granted. "You'll regret this," she said. "No," I replied. "I regret not doing it sooner." The garden was taking shape nicely. Elena had suggested tomatoes and peppers along the back fence, herbs in the raised bed near the kitchen window. She had good instincts about what would grow well in Ohio soil, about what was worth the effort to cultivate. "Hand me that trowel," she asked, not looking up from the seedlings she was transplanting. Saturday evening, working together in the backyard of the house that was finally starting to feel like home again. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this. Peace, partnership, someone who appreciated my steady nature instead of taking it for granted. Angela was gone. Not just from the house, but from my entire emotional landscape. I knew what had happened to her through the inevitable small-town gossip network, how Maria had refused to take her in after learning about the lies, how her affair partner had turned out to be less interested in supporting her financially than in enjoying her company on weekends, how she'd been forced to take a job waitressing at Denny's just to afford a studio apartment across town. But those details felt distant, irrelevant, ancient history from a life I'd outgrown. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Angela had tried to drag it out, hoping I'd change my mind or offer a settlement to avoid the hassle. But Sarah Chen had been right. Without employment history or claim to the house, Angela had no leverage. She'd gotten half the checking account balance and some of the newer furniture. Everything else stayed with me. I'd been promoted to assistant warehouse manager in January. Turned out that 15 years of perfect attendance and uncomplaining overtime had been noticed by people who mattered. The raise wasn't huge, but it was enough to start saving for the future Elena and I were planning together. Elena was different from Angela in every way that mattered. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital, understood long hours and physical exhaustion. Appreciated coming home to someone who cooked dinner and asked about her day. She was pretty in a natural way. No expensive makeup or designer clothes required, and she laughed at my jokes even when they weren't particularly funny. Most importantly, she saw me. Not what I could provide or buy or build, but me, Carlos, the man who got up early and worked hard and tried to do right by the people he cared about. She made me feel valued instead of used, appreciated instead of taken for granted. I ran into Maria at the grocery store yesterday, Elena said, wiping dirt from her hands. She asked about you, wanted to make sure you were doing okay. I nodded. Maria and I had talked a few times since the divorce, mostly her apologizing for not speaking up during the marriage. I harbored no resentment toward her. She'd been caught between loyalty to her sister and sympathy for me, an impossible position. When she'd finally told me the truth, it had set me free. Did she mention Angela? I asked. She moved away last month, following that man to Indianapolis, apparently. Maria seemed relieved. I felt nothing hearing this news. Not satisfaction or revenge or even curiosity about whether Angela would find the excitement she'd been seeking. She'd become like weather from a previous season, something that had happened but no longer affected the temperature of my days. The promotion had come with better health insurance, and Elena and I had talked about marriage, about kids, about buying a bigger house where we could raise a family properly. Not the desperate dreaming of someone trying to win love through sacrifice, but the practical planning of two adults who'd found genuine partnership. Elena stood up, brushing soil from her knees. I should get dinner started. Your mother's calling at 7, right? I'd reconnected with my family after the divorce, started having regular Sunday dinners with my mother and brother again. Elena fit in perfectly. She spoke enough Spanish to complement my mother's cooking. Didn't mind the loud conversations about work and politics and neighborhood gossip that had always made Angela uncomfortable. She wants to know if we've set a date yet, I said. Elena smiled. Have we? October? After the garden's finished producing? October sounds perfect, I replied. I looked around the backyard. Vegetables growing in neat rows, herbs thriving in the afternoon sun, 2 lawn chairs positioned to catch the evening light. This was what happiness looked like. Quiet, productive, built on truth instead of illusion. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Angela, probably, reaching out from Indianapolis with some crisis or emotional manipulation. I deleted it without reading it. That part of my life was over, filed away under lessons learned and mistakes I wouldn't repeat. Elena was in the kitchen now, humming while she cooked. Through the window, I could see her moving around the space that had been transformed from Angela's showcase into a place where actual meals were prepared and shared. No more expensive gadgets that never got used. No more decorative items that couldn't be touched. Just the tools of daily life, organized by someone who understood that a home was for living in. I used to believe that love meant never asking questions. Now I knew that love meant never having to. Real love, the kind Elena and I were building, thrived on honesty and mutual respect and the simple pleasure of working together toward shared goals. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the garden we'd planted together. Tomorrow I'd water the tomatoes before leaving for work, check the peppers for signs of growth, maybe add some mulch around the herbs. Small acts of care, tending something that would provide nourishment for months to come. That was the difference between building and taking, between love and exploitation. Angela had been a taker, someone who consumed what others created without contributing anything of lasting value. Elena was a builder, someone who understood that the best things in life required patience, effort, and mutual investment. I was grateful for the betrayal now, not because it hadn't hurt, but because it had freed me to find someone who deserved my devotion. Someone who saw my quiet strength as a gift instead of a weakness to exploit. The garden would be beautiful this fall. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.